So you pulled out an article from the MIT journal, the Technology Review, and this is how America gets its vaccines. I'm going to hit this real quick. So there's a handful of steps. There's a pre-step where there's two systems, Tiberius and VTrax. Tiberius pulls stuff in, and it's actually a pretty state-of-the-art system. It was just developed last year. It has some really cool overlay stuff and whatnot. VTrax is what we would call a legacy system, and there's an awful lot of uploading things via human interface, if you will, downloading them from one system and uploading them manually into that. So that's we're going to call that pre-step one. Step one is actually HHS receives regular updates from Pfizer and Moderna, as you would expect, and I guess soon J&J. Step two is HHS determines the numbers to send to each state. Right now, they're sort of hovering at about 4.3 million per week. And then Tiberius is used to divvy up the vaccine on the basis of census data. So it's a simple algorithm. It's not fancy machine learning. It just sort of looks at, the census data, says, hey, we're sending out 4.3 million, where are we going to send it? And that's what it does. Okay. So Tiberius pushes the figures around to other systems. It ends up getting to the CDC, where a technician manually uploads and sets order limits. In VTrax is something like an online store, if you think about it that way. And that's where orders are placed for the vaccine. And then we get to step three. Step three is the states and the territories distribute the vaccine locally. This is where it gets interesting. This is where it's, what's the best way to say this? So it gets to the states, and what's a lot of the article is pretty negative in terms of the states, and they've been underfunded, they're understaffed, and they're trying to get all this stuff. But anyway, it gets to the states, and then the states determine where it's going to go. It goes back up into VTrax, which I think is, they actually put the addresses in there, and then it ships the vaccines. Step four is ships the vaccines. And actually, amazingly, this is the easy part. FedEx and UPS know how to do this. They've been doing this for years, and they ship it. And then step five is administer the vaccine and report back. And that's what we were talking about a little bit earlier. And that's probably where I want to start with you is, this is where the vaccine gets down locally. They're talking about the fact that the states are struggling to divvy it up. The scheduling systems are a little uneven. Some states are using Salesforce. Some Eventbrite is another one that's being used. Some health systems are using their portal. Some retailers, and I don't think retailers have a lot of the vaccine. They've been sort of tapped to do the long-term care facilities, but I'm not sure they've been opened up to do the general public yet. But they're going to use their retail portals as well to do that. But then you have to report back. And if you don't report back and report back effectively, then your vaccine sort of goes down. So that's a little bit of the lay of the land of the 5 steps from that article. And we'll share that link to that article in the show notes. All right. So you shared this story, you sent it over. What are your thoughts, and where do you want to take the conversation?
I'm perpetually an optimist, Bill. Okay. So I like to think that, everyone is really doing the best that they can do. Right. I mean, I'm sure you can find some bad apples and actors out there. And this is maybe me speaking personally, but I like to think that people are doing hard work during this difficult time. And so, there was a quote in here about there was a lot of money and effort spent to develop the vaccine very quickly, or vaccines, but there wasn't nearly as much effort spent on the distribution process. And this is really, you mentioned, UPS and FedEx, like this is a logistics operation, right? And so it's not all situations where, someone is maybe entering things manually and there's no electronic record. I mean, we had another member, for example, and this is it just varies. Every state's different in what they require. I mean, it's a morass of different policies cobbled together quickly to try to, get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. I mean, it's very, very difficult. But we just spoke to another member who has a very large EHR vendor that you would know, and they use their scheduling system to facilitate the appointments, right? But say you're not, they take all comers, right? So if you're not in their system, then they have to create a record for you. But at the point of when they reach out and say, I need a vaccination, they will look for you in the system, and they're picking up certain pieces of demographic information. But if they don't get enough and they don't get the right match, I know you're going to find the shocking bell. Where am I going with this?
You're going to go national patient ID. There you go.
The dark hole of every single piece of interoperability policies that we have to deal with. And so this has become, again, now I'm sure there's lots of providers that are doing things successfully, though I would hope they're going back and spot checking their state registries. Note to CIOs, if you haven't spot checked your registry, have your staff go do that. Make sure the data is actually in there, because we've gotten some very alarming stories in the past 2 weeks that we plan on sharing publicly. And we're not going to be naming any providers, but we're going to make sure that lawmakers and policymakers know that this isn't working necessarily as seamlessly as you can. And again, so because this data wrapped up in such a way where when they hit into the state database and they don't have all of the, patient information, because they can't use social security number, Bill, guess what they're doing? They're using data aggregators. Oh my golly. So here we go. It's like, if you had a patient identifier number, you wouldn't have to be, working with data aggregators to have a better match. So it all comes back to, not everything, but like lots of things come back to being able to accurately identify the patient or the consumer at the point of care. So these are the things when there's a lot of things with the vaccine administration that are not technology oriented. This is the piece that we're focusing on.
Yeah, it's